So, what is this lecture about? So, if you may remember, in 2018, we had the Cambridge Analytica scandal. And then there were lots of discussions about it on all kinds of news groups. And this is a quote from a discussion on Y Combinator News from January 2019. F. Ethics and morality. We Facebookers love to brag about our paycheck size. So if this is how you feel, you're probably in the wrong talk. But don't leave, because I hope to change your mind. Now, I have to admit the title is a bit of a clickbait. Okay? I'm not really going to tell you how to be ethical. This is not a manual. There's no manual for this. It's a conversation. I'll try to give you my view of what does it mean to be ethical and how to pursue it. To paraphrase John F. Kennedy, who we just celebrated the anniversary a couple of weeks ago. We pursue ethics not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And I hope to inspire some reflection. If you come out of it and say, gee, I need to think about what I'm doing, then I've done my job. Now, it is also not to be confused with what people call professional ethics. So here is a course from Udemy, Human Values and Professional Ethics. And I would say the summary is, do a good job. As a professional, you must do a good job, okay? Carry your official decision and policies faithfully, maximize efficiency, inspire teamwork, etc., etc., etc. Yes, you should do that. If you're going to be professional, you must be a good professional. That's, again, not what I'm going to be talking about. And it's a bit unusual talk, because usually in the university we follow implicitly, rather than not everybody knows about it, but the Modern Research University was formed in Germany in the 19th century. One of the key figures was Max Weber, who was considered one of the founding figures of sociology. And his attitude was, paraphrased not by me, by someone else, the austere duty of the scholar is to preserve objectivity by distinguishing between facts and values, and by refusing to make in its capacity as a scholar judgment about values. So I would set aside Weber, and this talk will be personal and political and very opinionated, as you're going to see. Now, I'm talking about ethics. There are department of philosophy here. There are moral philosophers. I'm not a moral philosopher. I'm a concerned computer scientist. So let's get to the talk. So some years ago, I visited Maria Klawe, who is the president of Harvey Mudd. It was about a decade ago. And in her office, there is a big sign, don't be a jerk. It's kind of a big jarring. You go to president's office, you expect to be very dignified, and you see, don't be a jerk. And so I asked her to explain. And she said, I'm the most powerful in this institution. My decisions have huge implications on many people, and people will not even tell me, will not tell me exactly the implication of what I'm saying. So I need a constant reminder of don't be a jerk. I would say this is not a bad advice. You want to be ethical? That's a good start. Don't be a jerk. But I want to go a little deeper. And to go a little deeper, I will go to where it all started for me. So I grew up in a kibbutz in Israel. A kibbutz is a kind of a collective settlement. And here you see a picture. It was a very idyllic place. Age 10, my parents bought me a sequence of 10 volumes called The Young Technologist. And at that point, I was hooked on science. It was clear to me what I wanted to do in life. I'm coming from a family with rabbinical tradition. My father was a rabbi. My grandfather was a rabbi. But I was set up on science. But as my wife used to say, you can take the boy out of the synagogue, but you cannot take the synagogue out of the boy. So let's go back to the synagogue. At age 13 was my Bar Mitzvah, which is kind of a coming of age for Jewish boys. There's also for Jewish girl at age 12. And one of the traditions is you read from the Torah, from the 5 books of Moses, from the Pentateuch, and you read what, depending on the date of your birthday. That's how you assign reading. So this was my assigned reading, chapter 19 from Book of Numbers. This is the ordinance of the law which the Lord has commanded, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring thee a red heifer without spot, wherein there is no blemish, and upon which never came yoke. You shall give her into Eleazar the priest, that he may bring her forth without the camp. And one shall slay her before his face. And Eleazar shall take of her blood with his finger, and sprinkle of her blood directly before the tabernacle of the congregation 7 times. And one shall burn the heifer in his sight, her skin, her flesh, and her blood, with her dung shall be burned. Confession, that did not speak to me. They did not resonate with me. Red heifer with her dung, no, did not speak to me. But part of the Pentateuch did speak to me. For example, Book of Exodus, you shall not mistreat a stranger, nor shall you oppress him, for you are strangers in the land of Egypt. Somehow, some of this, one law shall be to him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourneth among you. Somehow, when we talk about immigrants, we forget, as far as I know, this part of the Pentateuch was not rejected even by the New Testament. You shall not oppress any widow or orphan. If you oppress him, if he cries out to me, I will surely hear his cry. It did resonate with me. So we see these incredibly different texts, one about red and tongue, and about justice, about treating people with justice. So there is a huge gap between different parts of the 5 books of the Pentateuch. And people realize it. I mean, this is no revelation. They're biblical scholars, and especially in the 19th century in Germany, they started biblical scholarship, not as a religious. You read it as a historical document, and you try to understand how it came to be. And then you realize it's not a coherent document. There are inherent tensions. There are many layers, and there are tensions between them. And one of the tensions was pointed out by the Jewish writer Asher Ginsberg early in the 20th century. And he wrote an essay called The Priest and the Prophet. And he showed the tension between the priest who wrote about the heifer and her dung. And here is a quote from Amos 5:20-24. Thou you offer me burnt offering and your meat offering, I will not accept them. Neither will I regard the peace offering of your fat beast. Take thou away from me the noise of thy song. For I will not hear the melody of thy viols, but let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. This last sentence was a favorite quote of Martin Luther King Jr. Okay? Let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. Now, if you read the Bible chronologically, then first we have the 5 books, and the prophets come later. So you say, what are the prophets now rebelling against the priests? What's going on here? Well, the answer is that we get the wrong impression by reading the book as if they're chronological. In reality, things were written about the same time. Later on, when it was edited, we got this order. But the Pentateuch and the prophets were written roughly around the same time. We don't know exactly the different chronologies, but somewhere in the 4th to the 9th century BCE. And so in the Bible itself, there is a very deep tension that goes to the very roots of Judaism between morals and rituals. The prophets were about morals, the priests about ritual. And the Jewish prophet did not invent the focus on ethics. Let's go back 1,000 years earlier. We find the Code of Hammurabi from Mesopotamia. And here is the prologue. Anu and Bel, these are the Babylonian gods, called by name me, Hammurabi, the exalted prince, who feared God, to bring about the rule of righteousness to the land, to destroy the wicked and the evildoers, so the strong shall not harm the weak, to further the well-being of mankind. So he's an absolute monarchist, 18th century BCE, and he says, what is his role? To further the well-being of mankind. I want you to remember this phrase, to further the well-being of mankind. So let's go back to justice. Let's take this favorite quote of Martin Luther King Jr. Let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. To be Ethics 101, this is it. Now, I kind of also read it as you have an obligation to stand up for the weak. And I'm going to tell you about 2 incidents where I think I was able to live up to that standard. And I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you this to hopefully to inspire you and to even more important, to inspire myself to keep doing it. So I'll go back to the early 90s. Before I came to RISE, I was a department manager at IBM Research in IBM Almaden in South San Jose. And I became a department manager in 1989. And 2 years later, Ashok Chandra became my manager, director of computer science. And in the same year, we hired Thomas Feder as a research staff member. In tradition, IBM was after 1 year, you do what's called first year review. You ask the young researchers to give a talk to all the department managers, and they would discuss it, and then they would give some evaluation. And after the review, Ashok called me to his office, and he told me, you have to tell Thomas that he'd failed the review. I was taken aback because I thought the work was quite good. And I told Ashok, I'm afraid I cannot do that. I believe that the work is good. There's no way I'm going to tell him that he failed the review. And this was not academia, okay? Nobody has tenure. You could have said, if you don't want to do that, you're going to step down as a manager. You can be a manager if this is your job as a manager. But he realized that this is going to be a big deal. So he backed down and says, okay, I will let you decide how to manage it. I'm telling you my opinion, but you have to decide how to manage it. Many years later, that work won an award called the Church Award. And unfortunately, at this point, Ashok Chandra died in 2014 from liver cancer. So he never got to see how this failed work actually won a major award. The second incident was here at RISE, about 15 years ago. So remember, 2008 was a financial crisis. Our neighboring courses, Baylor College of Medicine, had grandiose ambitions to build a new hospital, took large loans, and then discovered that the loans were not enough. They could not finish the project, but they could not make money to pay back the loans without finishing the project. So then they couldn't get more loans at this point, the financial crisis. So they look around and they see, oh, nice little institution across the street with a large endowment. So they approach RISE, how about you bail us out? And the president at the time, David LeBron, thought, gee, we will make RISE about 4 times bigger, and maybe we move up in ranking. He liked the idea. So in November of that year, I was asked by the president to join a faculty advisory committee. And I thought, wow, this is a major proposition is on the table. Of course, we should discuss it, and the president wants my advice. Of course, I will do that. So I go to this meeting, and after a while, I realized he really doesn't want our advice at all. This is called the theater of consultation. He wants to say, I've consulted with the faculty. But he really doesn't care about our opinion at all. So this started a whole brouhaha, and at the end of the day, the faculty senate appointed a faculty merger review committee. So this was a committee of faculty run by the faculty to form an opinion and express their opinion about the merger. When LeBron realized that, he said, gee, I can't, he was, lawyer, have this thing, don't ask a question if you don't know what is the answer. So he said, I have to appoint my own committee. So I appoint a committee of administrators to give their evaluation. So 2009 was the battle of the committees. In the summer of 2009, the faculty merger review committee issued a negative report. They say it's very risky and the benefits are questionable. Of course, David LeBron, committee of administrators, issues a glowing report. Became very, very public dispute, opposing op-eds in the Thresher, opposing op-eds in the Houston Chronicle. And just about 13 years ago, I stood here and I gave it a lecture, the whole may be less than the sum of the parts. You can find it on YouTube. 3 months later, RISE terminated the negotiation. Many people gave me credit, but I said, no, I did not scuttle the deal. I just shone a bright light on what was inherently a bad deal, and it collapsed of its own bad weight, so to speak. Not because, I just shone bad light on it. It was harder to get away with going forward because so much light was shone into it. And if you're interested in the gory details, everything is on my webpage. So this is generally how to be ethical person, justice, stand up for the weak, speak to power, speak truth to power. But this is not about computer science. So what's specific about computer science? What I promise you here, how to be ethical computer scientist. So this year, the Association for Computer Machinery, this is the premier association in computing, had an event, but over the last decade, there were actually 3 events. In 2012 was the Turing centenary. Alan Turing is kind of practically the patron saint of computing, and he was born in 1912. We do the celebration of this in 2012. It was a celebration of computing. Look at us, we are so important, we are ascendant. 5 years later, the Turing Award, the major award in computing, is named after Turing, and it was reached its 50th anniversary, so we did another event, and then celebrating, look at us, we are so important. This year in June 10, please pay attention to the date, on June 10, ACM celebrated its 75th anniversary. It was founded in 1947 by people with, it was a very, very young, computers incredibly young, people had the foresight that this is going to be a big deal, we need to form an association. Now you look at the program, you see it's much more sober and somber. The panelists will imagine what might be next for technology and society in the years to come. And much of the discussion was not look at our technology, was not kind of chest beating, was more about societal consequences of technology. And one of the participants put on Facebook, I found the whole thing a little depressing. Why can't we just celebrate? Why do we have to talk about adverse impacts? But you cannot take this birthday of ACM and disconnect it and not ignore the context of which it happened. June 10, what happened on June 9? June 9 was the first congressional hearing about the January 6, 2021 insurrection, where we basically learned that the President of the United States was trying to subvert the legal transfer of power in the United States. And 2 weeks before that, here in Texas, we had the Uvalde massacre. Two teachers and 19 children were killed by a gunman. And this hit me personally very hard, and maybe partly because every time I heard on the radio Uvalde, what I was hearing is Vardi. It was very disturbing. Now, what these events are not related to computing, but these events reveal how deeply polarized this country is. For example, last July, there was a New York Times poll. 92% of Democrats think that Trump threatened U.S. democracy. 76% of Republicans think he was exercising his rights to contest the election. Support for banning the sale of assault weapons, so to speak. Among gun owners, among Democratic, just after the Uvalde massacre, among Democratic gun owners, 84% are in favor of banning assault weapons. Among Republican gun owners, 75% are against banning assault weapons. The polarization is now so deep that we have political paralysis, and there is a real worry about democracy, because democracy requires an element of trust. I mean, think of what happened in Bush versus Gore. Very contested election. The Supreme Court says, stop the count. And Al Gore said, okay, we stop the count. And he presides in the Senate over certifying the votes, giving George W. Bush the presidency. George Shultz died in early 2022. He was over 100. And a month before he died, he wrote an essay about the importance of trust. He said, trust is the cornerstone of everything. When there was trust in the room, good things happen. When trust was not in the room, good things did not happen. Everything else is details. And right now, we are losing trust of each other. And people are writing articles about the disunited states. And this is a map showing what will happen if you take the red state and the blue states, and each one will form its own confederation. But the worry is that this will not happen, it may happen, but it will not happen peacefully. Robert Kagan in Washington Post last September, the United States is heading into its greatest political and constitutional crisis since the Civil War, with the real chance of the next 3 to 4 years of incidents of mass violence, breakdown of federal authority, and the division of the country into warring red and blue enclaves. And trust has declined so much that in the Bar in the Hill, it's a Washington, D.C. publication, said a majority of Americans say the US government is corrupt. Almost a third say it may soon be necessary to take arms against it. Really, to me, kind of, we couldn't imagine that. You know, if somebody told me this is going to happen 5 years ago, somebody came up with a script for a movie or TV show, I said, nah, it's just too dystopian, cannot happen, not realistic. So there is important questions, what happened, what went wrong? And I think historians will spend the next 50 years trying to figure out what happened, what went wrong. I don't think we have the luxury of waiting 50 years until they have an answer. I think the crisis is upon us. So I'll offer my own analysis, okay? And for this, I'll go back to 1981. And you see what happened in 1981. Some very pivotal events. Number one, I arrived in this country as a postdoc. And over the years, I've acquired a perfect American accent. Seriously. A month before I arrived, I don't think I realized at the time, the IBM PC was introduced. It was became known as IBM PC later. Then IBM introduced it, personal computer model 5150, but became known as IBM PC. And early in the year, Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as US president. So these two events, not the first one, but number two, the PC and Ronald Reagan, they were really pivotal events. Why is that? The PC was a smashing success. By January 1983, just about a year plus after the introduction of IBM PC, Time magazine usually have the person of the year on the cover, who is the person of most influence and positive notoriety in the world, and they put the PC on it, and it became the machine of the year, not the person of the year, the machine of the year. The computer moves in. It really changed the world. Personal computer was introduced in the mid-70s, but IBM, it became a business machine, and it started a tsunami of technology. By the mid-80s, if you are a knowledge worker, you had a PC on your desk at work. Within a few years, you had another machine at home, because if you got used to work with a computer, you started using machines at home. 89, the World Wide Web was introduced. Mid-90s, internet, people now forget, internet used to be owned by the government. It was ARPANET, and then became NSFNet, and then it was commercialized in 1995. And that enabled Google to launch and Facebook to launch. And when the iPhone was introduced in 2007, it was already, all the infrastructure was there for all of us to carry in our pocket, a powerful computer connected to everything. But this was happening exactly at the same time with the tsunami of neoliberalism, which was a real change, a dramatic change in kind of the economic policy for this country. So neoliberalism is a very, I don't know what radical, but very deep free market capitalism. And it means that you reduce regulation, you let the economic players to do whatever they want to do. You reduce the size of the government, you privatize things, you deregulate, you let only the minimum intervention by the government in the economy is via interest rate monetarism. We hear it now, we see it trying to regulate the economy via interest rate, reduce taxes, open trade, free trade, globalization, and free trade. Warren Buffett said in 2006, and Warren Buffett is not exactly a bleeding heart socialist, he said there is a class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, it's making war, and we are winning. And why would he say that? Because you have to look at what happened over these 40 years. So we think that manufacturing in this country has gone down because it all went to China. But this is a myth. Of course, we couldn't compete on making sneakers. So we moved to higher value things in manufacturing. And the red line here is volume of manufacturing in real dollars that is adjusted for inflation. You can see that it's been going up since then. What happened is, roughly around starting again when Reagan introduced, manufacturing employment went down by many, many millions of workers. And this has catastrophic impact on American society. Which American society? We don't notice it here in our world. Where do you see manufacturing? Manufacturing is usually not in the big cities. The land is too expensive. They go out, it's in small cities, it's in Midwest, in the rural areas. And there, every manufacturing job lost meant that other jobs were lost because the manufacturing people were paid $20 to $30 an hour. They supported many restaurants and shops. So the huge decline. So if we look overall at the economy, we see again that early 80s were a pivotal moment. So we look at 4 economic indicators. One is labor productivity. Economy grows because we're becoming more productive. That's how economy grows. Okay? GDP per capita grows because we're becoming more productive. And so productivity drives GDP. And if GDP grows, we are generating jobs and income rises. And you can see from the early 50s, for the next 30 years, it's what the economy said was the Goldilocks. Everything happened in lockstep. Productivity grew, generated jobs. Now, of course, there was also a period we know of not everybody benefited, minorities were not all benefited, women did not always benefit. But the economy as a whole, you see there was a rising tide, raises all boats. But then something happened around 1980, and you see divergence or decoupling. So productivity continued to grow, and GDP grows, but we're generating fewer jobs, and income has flattened. And underneath, we see growing inequality. If you look at the top 1% and comparing to the bottom 50%, you see that in 1962, the top 1% earned about 12% of the income, and the bottom 50% earned close to 50% of the income. And now move forward, and you see how the top 50% are earning a smaller and smaller share of the income, and top 1% are earning more and more of the income. And when you zoom in to look at what's happening, then economists look at the skill spectrum, which is low skill, middle skill, and high skill. The low skill, pretty much, these are the people who need to do things that we cannot automate. There's no automation there, being cleaning tables in a restaurant. We're very far from being able to automate it. And we're paying people minimum wage, so minimum wage has been pretty flat. So the low skill part of the pie has stayed pretty much fixed. High skill expanded. More and more people need to use Word, use spreadsheets. More and more people need to use it. So there are more jobs at the high end, at the top third. But middle skills, which is the middle class typically, you can see we went from about 60% to 45%. So the country, that's another tell you the country is more and more polarized. And education turns out to be a big polarizer. So if you look at how wages have increased depending on education, then the people who have graduate degrees, their income has risen in real dollars. And the people with bachelor degree also have increased. But people without bachelor degree, their income has stayed flat or even went down in real dollars. So all this creates, I would say, economic polarization. And then into this, and this happened so much that even some conservative, David Book was a conservative columnist of the New York Times, and New York Times has a kind of an issue of columnists that they had to write what were they wrong about. And David Book wrote, I was wrong about capitalism. He said the most educated Americans, this is us, were amassing more and more wealth, dominating the best living areas, pouring advantages into their kids. A highly unequal caste system was forming. And into this economic polarization, we threw cognitive polarization. So in the old days, where there were essentially 3 TV networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, because they all got spectrum from the government, it was broadcast, government had conditions, and the condition was, it was called the fairness doctrine. They had to present all issues in a balanced way. So it didn't matter if you listen to ABC, CBS, and NBC, depending which anchorman, they're all men at the time, which anchorman you liked, but essentially they had to present balanced view of the news. Then in 1987, the FCC the spirit of neoliberalism, say, we have cable now. We have lots of point of views. We don't need balance. We don't need fairness doctrine anymore. So what happens now? You don't flip. Nobody flip between 5 different news channels to get all the point of view, okay? I don't know why, but doctors' offices all play Fox News, okay? And if you just watch Fox News, you end up living in different reality. And Fox News, you should know, it's not the worst. There are even news channels much farther to the right than Fox News. So this created cognitive filter bubbles. Now we talked about the tsunami of technology, which was about the hardware. But as I mentioned, the internet. So when I said internet, we don't really mean necessarily just the cable and the protocols. We mean the whole ecosystem. And the roots go back to the 1980s. When I was a postdoc at Stanford, there was something called the Well, which was a dial-up bulletin board. Pre-internet, dial-up, you had to dial up to connect using a modem. There was something called Usenet, Unix to Unix network, again, mostly by academics who had access to Unix. And the counterculture came back from the 60s. This was still the age of the hippies. And much of the social ferment at the time was against the Vietnam War, so it was against government, it was anti-authoritarian. And so out of this anti-establishment mentality came out, information wants to be free. Of course, information doesn't want anything, right? Bits are bits. We can say, we want information to be free. But that was the attitude at the time. So when Tim Berners-Lee introduced the World Wide Web in 1989, his vision was unfettered sharing of information. Everything should be free. And in the early days, it was exhilarating. Suddenly, you have access to information that before that, you went and spent days in the library. And now you just went to, I remember when I was in Israel and I wanted to learn about American university. You had to go to the American consulate. They have a special library about American university. There was no otherwise you couldn't find the information. Now, everything is at your fingertips. But in fact, there's so much in your fingertips, you can find stuff. There's too much stuff. So in the early 90s, there was a big question. How do we find stuff on the internet? Too much TMI. So the first answer people say, libraries already solve the problem. They have millions of books, they have catalogs. Let's have a catalog for the internet. That was the business model of Yahoo. There will be a directory for the internet. And it worked at the beginning, but then the internet kept growing and growing and growing. There was no way they could keep up with the growth of the internet. So it didn't work. So people said, no, we need search engines. The first one were pretty bad, but then Google came up with a fantastic search engine. But all of them on their mind, information wants to be free. So Google says search is free. How do we make money? So they came up with a great idea, advertising. They said broadcast TV was free, supported by advertising. We are going to do the same. But very quickly they discovered that online advertising is not effective. Why? For example, in newspaper, TV, you're basically have captive audience. Okay, you can go to the bathroom, but how many times can you go to the bathroom? Newspaper, to real advertisement, you want to catch your eye, they'll put a big banner. They tried big banner on the web, people hated it. So they came up with another idea, brilliant business idea, micro-targeted advertising. So they're going to learn about you, and they are going to show you advertising that fit your profile. That means that on each one of us, they have to construct a very detailed profile. So people keep talking about AI and machine learning. You're interacting with machine learning dozen times a day. Every time you open your computer, connect to the internet, machine learning is deciding what to show you. When you do a search, what are you going to see? Not what Google thinks is, there's no one authoritative source of information. They will show you what they think you might be interested in. Advertisement, what you might be interested in. So we're now not seeing, it's not like we're all watching ABC and CBS and NBC anymore. We're all seeing a picture that was tailored to us. They took the cognitive bubble that we had before and took it to the next level of filter bubbles now. And that's what's causing these different realities for the red and blue states. And underneath it is massive collection of information. In 2019, Shoshana Zuboff wrote a thick book, 700 pages, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. And, you know, I won't try to summarize it, but in 2021, after the January 6th insurrection, she wrote an op-ed in New York Times. The coup we are not talking about. She said, we can have democracy or we can have surveillance society, but we cannot have both. In Silicon Valley, they say, if you're not paying for it, you're the product. There's no free lunch. And in particular, when it comes to privacy, there is just such abject hypocrisy by Silicon Valley. So here is, if you have something that you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. What are you trying to hide? Who said it? Eric Schmidt, who was CEO of Google in 2009. Eric Schmidt does not want us to remember that in 2005, 2 Senate reporters decided to show how much you can discover using Google. So they used Google on Eric Schmidt, they found lots of personal details, and they published to say, here is what you can find on now using Google. And he threw a hissy fit on this one. He felt violated, and he told Google, you're not talking to Senate. For a whole year, nobody in Google was allowed to talk to Senate. Here's another quote, the age of privacy is over. Who said that? Not a big surprise, Mark Zuckerberg in 2010. But in 2012, Mark Zuckerberg bought a house in Palo Alto, and he bought all the houses around. Okay? So privacy for me, but for you, the age of privacy is over. And in fact, Facebook took the idea from Google and took it to the next level. Google show you advertisements and maybe the order of the search results. But when you open Facebook, you see what Facebook wants you to see. How do they decide what you want to see? They collect a whole bunch of information about you. They show you what they think. They want to maximize user engagement. So they took a micro-targeted advertising and made it nano-targeted advertising. And they've created, I mean, people have studied this, and they said people are really addicted to social media. So in Rodrigo, the course that I taught with Rodrigo was an exercise of one of the assignments was device abstinence. So for 24 hours, you shouldn't have to avoid all devices, then to have to write an essay, what was the experience like? Just to show you how completely out of touch I am, I thought, they will say, I went out and I smelled the flowers, and I went to the coffee shop with my friends, and it was wonderful. I'm completely off base. They all were miserable. They couldn't go anywhere because they will get lost without the GPS. They couldn't contact their friends because how did they contact them? And they had no idea what's going on. They were just there. And in fact, when you look at what they describe their experience, and you open any article on withdrawal symptoms, it's a one-to-one match. I mean, just very clear. It is really, they're really addicted to social media. And indeed, in April of this year, Jonathan Haidt in The Atlantic wrote an article, The Past 10 Years. And he wrote, the story of Babel is the best metaphor I have found for what happened to America in the 2010s and for the fractured country we now inhabit. Something went terribly wrong. Very suddenly we were disoriented, unable to speak the same language or recognize the same truth. We're cut off from one another and from the past. And he blames, again, social media. I mean, we had already the cognitive bubble because of cable TV, and then social media took it to the next level. So you want to be an ethical computer scientist? First, we have to accept responsibility. We can't say Mark Zuckerberg did it. I mean, many of the students we educate here end up working for Facebook. We are part of this project, directly or indirectly. So first, we have to accept responsibility. Reminds me of a novel was published in the mid-80s, Ender's Game. Spoiler alert, I'll tell you the basic plot. Ender is a teenage boy. He thinks he is a friend, they think they're playing video games. Unbeknownst to them, they're actually fighting an intergalactic war. And when they win the war, when they win the game, they won the war, and they have destroyed the whole civilization. So to use the Star Wars metaphor, we think of ourselves as the Rebel Alliance, in the garage, doing clever things. We are now the Empire. We are the Death Star. Now, so you hear a lot of talk about machine ethics, AI ethics, responsible AI, or corporation that have a stakeholder responsibility. But I'm a big skeptic on this. I think if we want machines to behave, it's require laws and regulation. Somehow, expecting machines to be ethical is shirking our responsibility. Corporations, I want to see when corporations are willing to give billions of dollars in the name of ethics. I've yet to see it happen. So who has to be ethical? We have to be ethical. Ultimately, we write the software, we build these machines, we run this corporation. Ethics is our obligation, not we shouldn't push it on machines and corporations. It doesn't mean the corporation will have a free license to destroy the environment, but ultimately the responsibility falls on us as human beings. So the Associated Computer Machinery, I mentioned ACM before, they have code of ethics. And this is the first sentence, first two sentences. Computing professional acts to change the world. We have seen that happening. To act responsibly, they should reflect upon the wider impact of their work, consistently supporting the public good. This is what it means to be an ethical computer scientist, consistently supporting the public good. When we taught the class, before you came with Tina, we once did a poll. We talked toward the end of the class, I wanted to see, I said, how many students will take a job offer from Facebook? It was an anonymous poll, we got the result, about 2/3 said yes, 1/3 said no. So I asked if somebody who said yes is willing to speak up, and somebody said, good jobs, good pay, interesting problems, good colleagues, smart colleagues, yeah, I'll take the job. I asked someone who said no to say why is no. And he said, I'm a Rice graduate. I'm going to be a Rice graduate with a bachelor in computer science. My skills are going to be in big demand. Why should I take the job in the questionable companies? There are lots of other companies that don't do ethically questionable things. So he said, in this case, it's easy to be ethics. I will live well without working for Facebook. Now, when I start talking about the public good, I wrote an article recently about universities and the public good, and somebody posted it on some Rice alums group, and some people reacted if I was advocating Marxism-Leninism, pretty much. Okay? So I want to remind people, this is not Marxism-Leninism. We, the people of the United States, in order to justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. The whole purpose of the Constitution is to build a mechanism to support the public good. This is the founding document of this country. So the public good is not some socialist idea. This is the fundamental idea of this country. Now, I agree that it's not always going to be black and white, but even take maybe the one of the most obvious commandment that we have in the Bible: "Thou shalt not kill." It would be black and white, right? But it's not, because we make exception. We say, yeah, but self-defense and just war, and even the Bible talks about death penalty. So nothing is black and white, but sometimes I would say it's almost black and white. So Jacobin magazine wrote in 2019 about Uber. From the start, they wrote, Uber's business model has been based on habitual criminality and shocking indifference to human life. Now, this is a very left-wing magazine, so you may kind of say, okay, this is the very left-wing. But earlier this year, there was a massive leak, a whistleblower leaked massive number of files, over 100,000 files, to The Guardian, and they sat down and read them. And they wrote a sequence of articles, how Uber broke laws, duped police, and secretly lobbied government, leak reveals. And the people inside Uber, they knew it. So I think, I'm not talking about the driver now. The driver trying to make a living. But the people who work for Uber, the software engineer who work for Uber, I don't think that's for the public good. Now let's look at ourselves. If in computer science we educate students who are not socially responsible, these students, we are not supporting the public good. Because the students go out, they join the industry, the vast majority of them, and if we're not at least telling them about this concept of the public good and their professional social responsibility, then we're not responsible. So I would say, if we want to be ethical educators, we must talk to our students about social responsibility. At the end, they'll behave the way they behave. But this is something fairly new. We only started doing it in the last few years. Computer science now is a large program. It's, it's easy to do it for a small elective course. Part of, I know that how to scale it up is a major challenge now, how to reach every computer science student, but it must be part of what we do. And I encourage you to read an article that Rodrigo and I wrote last year, Deep Tech Ethics. I have to say the experience of teaching it is very gratifying, okay? I've taught computer science technical courses, and you don't get the same feedback. So at the end of the course, students have to write essays about their own personal responsibility. And this is a quote. I believe that there was no problem that couldn't be solved by the all-powerful technology. It was only a matter of time before scientists devised the correct algorithm to solve all the problems of the world. Looking back, I realized how naive I was. So the ability to change students' hearts and minds with such a course is just, I find it very moving. Now, it turns out these questions, let's go back to the synagogue where we started. This question of how to be an ethical person, it's not a new question. People have been asking these questions for a very, very long time. So there is in the Jewish literature, there was the Bible, and then there was something called the Mishnah, which is the kind of second, was elaboration on the Bible. And there's a whole book called Saying of Our Fathers, where they ask this question, how to be an ethical person. And I just want to give you two quotes because I think they summarize beautifully what we are talking about. Hillel the Elder, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? I'm not asking anyone here to take a vow of poverty and to become Mother Teresa and go to Calcutta to feed the, I mean, if you want to go to Calcutta, I'll cheer you up, but I'm not telling you to do that. Take care of yourself first. But being only for myself, what am I? This has become an ideology in this country. I mean, rugged individuality, that sounds wonderful, but think what it means, rugged individuality. I don't care about anyone else, I only care about myself. And Hillel says, what are you if you don't care about other people? And when should you start caring about other people? He said, if not now, when? Rabbi Tarfon really talking about contributing to the public good. He said, the day is short and the work is plentiful. There's a lot of work to do. It's not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. I think that the fact that we're not talking to students about it, not just to computer science students, but to white students in general, is our failure. We're not talking to students about why we educate them here. We want to educate leaders who will make the world a better place. They have a personal responsibility to, neither at your liberty to neglect it. And even if you look at the ACM Code of Ethics, computing programs change the world. To act responsibly, they should reflect upon the wider impact of their work. And this is something that we in computing have failed to do. We get in love with new technology, a new gizmo, let's roll it out. Now, it's the metaverse. Oh, let's go with the metaverse. Of course, why does Mark Zuckerberg want the metaverse? More data. That's why he wants the metaverse, okay? He wants not only to be able to track what you click, but every movement of you in the metaverse. That's what he wants. He wants the metaverse. But we can again go back to the Mishnah. And there is a story about Alexander the Great when he conquered the Middle East. He goes to meet with the Jewish sages of the South. And he asked them, who is called a wise man? They responded to him, the person who sees the consequences of his actions. So all of us must think harder about the wider impact of our work. And yesterday was Ada Lovelace's day. Ada Lovelace was considered, she was in the 19th century. She was a self-taught mathematician. She considered the first programmer. And she was the first to speak about computing for the public good. So maybe it's time for computer scientists, the same way the doctor take the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. Maybe we should take, I call it the Lovelacian Oath. First, do no harm. Yes, you have a new gizmo, you have new ideas, you have a new way to make money. Go ahead, but first, do no harm. Now, I want to finish by zooming out and looking at the bigger issue of technology and humanity. And I quote Edward Wilson, who was a very distinguished biologist. The true problem of humanity, he wrote, is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and technology of gods. I'll rephrase it. Today's technology is taking advantage of our Paleolithic emotions and our medieval institutions. And to look at some of these bigger questions, we're going to have a conference at Rice on technology, culture, and society in December 5-6 of this year here at Rice University. And I hope that some of you will become interested, and you can just search on the web for this technology, culture, and society, Rice University. And if you cannot find it, just send me an email, I'll send you a pointer. Thank you very much.